You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of singers and sound creators who are redefining what it means to make music with the voice. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Evan, and we are back from a restful Thanksgiving break with the wonderful Angela Longo, who is the CEO of the vocal company and one of the founding members of the vocal band Muse.
We talked about how she created her own unique space in acapella production, how she got Muse off the ground and running as she kept the band going, and what's next for the vocal company. Stay tuned.
Go.
Hello, everybody. We are here this week with Angela Longo. Thank you so much for joining us, Angela.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. We've been trying to make this happen, going back and forth, but you're a busy person. But we finally got the chance to make it happen. Super happy with that. You have done so much in acapella, but we kind of want to start from the roots and just where were you born and raised, and like what was the influence from your parents as far as music was in the house?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Boynton Beach, Florida, so South Florida, a little bit above Miami, about an hour north of Miami. And yeah, I don't know. I started singing from a really young age. My parents weren't really musically inclined. And didn't really know what to do with me as somebody who was. I would like sit in, my bedroom and just like sing at all hours of the day. And my dad, as much as he loved me, would be like, wow, she just doesn't stop. Okay, what are we going to do with her? So I joined choir at a young age in like, I don't know, 5th grade or whenever they start choir. And then I went to these auditions for a middle school of the arts. So it's basically, think of like a voice major in college, but at a middle school level. And yeah, so I did that all through middle school and high school. I was basically a vocal major at an art school where we had juries and all these crazy things at a young age. So I got the voice training young. But then, I was like, I don't know if I want to be an opera singer. Yeah, maybe I'll just go like be a psychologist or something else for college. So I went to Florida State because I knew that they also had an amazing music program. So if I did want to get involved with music, I could. Yeah. And the first week that I was in college, I was bombarded by a bunch of girls and saying like, can you sing? Please join Acapella. And I was like, oh yeah, I can sing. Okay. So then, yeah, I started as a freshman at Florida State in the Florida State Acapellas. And that's kind of like my growing up story of like singer to acapella.
So was that your first kind of experience with acapella, the acapellas, or had you like known of it before and heard it before?
In high school, we did like, small acapella pieces in our singers ensemble, but never acapella as it's like traditionally sung. I mean, it was just kind of starting to get really popular as I got into college. So that I'm showing my age, but that was in 2005 when I started college. So, Boca was just starting to get on the rise. The ICCAs were starting to get a little bit crazy. So this was before Pitch Perfect and everything. So, I mean, we didn't really have a lot of high school programs, so I had never heard of it. Other than, your typical, like, I listened to Boyz II Men and, things like that and, Carmen Sandiego. But other than that, no, I had no exposure to acapella. So I was kind of just like bombarded in the student union by like people screaming at me and being like, can you sing? And I was like, yes. Oh my God. I was like, I had like asked my advisor if there was any sort of thing that I could join. I was like, is there any sort of like glee club or anything? Like, I had no idea. I was like sitting here thinking I was going to like sing, King Singer's arrangements. Like, no, I had no idea what acapella was. But yeah, that was my first exposure, was being in acapellas.
So like it must have, or if I had to guess based on your career trajectory, it probably slowly consumed more and more of your life was doing acapella stuff. Like how did that kind of happen? Yeah,
I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, it started out as a fun thing in my freshman year, but we ended up, actually one of the girls who was a couple years ahead of me, Virginia. She actually is involved in a lot of acapella now. A lot of you know her as VG. And she tells me the story about when I was a freshman. We recorded our CD at this like local random studio in Tallahassee, and like I was the only freshman that like stayed behind, and like I gave notes to like the engineer. I had no idea what I was doing, really. I was just like, I was so excited. She's like, I've never seen somebody so excited about like recording an acapella. And yeah, so I mean, at that time I had no idea. I was just like super interested in it. And then I started arranging my sophomore year and, you know, got on the officer board and then was president my junior year and then took over as music director my senior year. And that year we kind of exploded. We did a lot. We were like, oh, we're going to record a CD. I saw All Night Yahtzee record at the school and then send all their tracks to Dave Sprandio. And I was like, I want to do that too. So I got in contact with him and we were prepping for ICCA. And that year we ended up going to finals. So we were like super busy trying to record this. We were like self-recording the CD in my apartment and getting ready to go to finals at the same time. So it was like kind of nuts. It was just like a whirlwind that last year. But I learned a lot, and that was kind of when I knew that I wanted to do a cappella as a career. And I remember asking Dio if I could intern at his studio, and he was like, well, my studio is like my house, so like you can come watch us mix the album, I guess. And I was like, yeah, cool. And I like obviously never made it up to North Carolina because I was in Florida and so young, but that I was just convinced that I was going to intern for somebody in a cappella, not realizing that at that time that did not exist. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll maybe go to audio school or something. So then I started looking up audio engineering programs and decided to go to one in New York City after I graduated from Florida State. Because I was like, you know, I'll just finish my degree, because I think I figured out a little bit too late that I didn't want to be a psychologist. And I was like, well, I'm already a senior and I've like worked really hard at this, so I might as well just like get this degree and then go on top of it and then go learn about like audio engineering in New York City. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I always knew that I loved music, and I was like one of those kids that like got the karaoke machine and like would record myself from one side of the tape track to the next, singing a harmony and then overdubbing it on top of it. And like for some reason that didn't set me off that like maybe I should go into audio, but like, you know, as a 12-year-old like recording all the harmonies to Bop, like I just didn't know. But like later I look back and I was like, wow, I was mistaken. I should not have like gone to school for psychology. I should have gone for music tech, but whatever, it's fine. I figured it out eventually.
I'm sure it comes in handy from now and again.
You know, honestly, yeah, we'll get to that later when we talk about running a business. But yeah, it definitely does. So
you said that after Florida State, you went to New York for the audio production program there. So when you kind of decided to go there, were you still like, I'm like full force a cappella is the thing I want to produce, or were you kind of just like, I want to learn how to produce in general for the music industry?
I was pretty gung-ho about wanting to do a cappella. Also, I apologize. My dog is barking in the background, so I hope you can't hear him, but he's a little upset that I've left him alone.
Love you, Riley.
Anyway, so when I moved to New York City, I was pretty set that I wanted to do a cappella. I actually was in talks with one of my friends, and we wanted to start our own a cappella studio geared towards all-female a cappella, since that's where we came from. And we realized that a lot of things kind of catered to either mixed or male a cappella at the time, especially. And we were going to call it like, I don't know, I liked cupcakes, so we were going to call it like Red Velvet Studios or something crazy like that. And then I was like, yeah, but I need to like actually learn how to do this. She did a lot of arranging, and where I used to arrange, but I would consider myself more of like a coach, a vocal coach, a director, and you know, now an engineer. So I was like, well, I need to learn. Like I did, I got my Pro Tools for Dummies books when I was like learning how to record for acapellas, and like Dio gave me some tips, but like I wanted to actually learn all of the actual things that I needed to know in order to become an engineer about, different frequency ranges and about different gear and, how to actually use Pro Tools instead of just like using a Pro Tools for Dummies book. So that was the main reason, but my whole intention was to do acapella. I mean, I did my final project, basically an entire acapella arrangement, but they like made me add other instruments, so I like had a drummer come in and do the drums, and I had like a bass player do the bass, and then every other part was like basically acapella backgrounds. And they were like, we've never heard anything like this before. I was like, yeah, that's fine. So I kind of knew that's like what I wanted to do. And during the time that I was in school in New York City, my friend actually had a dinner where Mark Hines was there, and she was talking about how we wanted to start our own studio. And this was the time when Mark Hines and Nick Lyons were starting the vocal company. And they were like, oh, well, we just branched off from our other company. Like, we're starting this new company. Why don't you and your friend come join on? And, I was like, yes, this is great. I will totally do that. And so actually, it was the girl I'm talking about. Her name was Lauren. You guys probably know her as Lo Barrero. And Jill Clark was on the team at the time, another kid named Durand, and then myself and Mark and Nick. So I kind of got sucked into the TVC world right when it started. But I was doing like, email gathering and like sales emails at first, and I was like, but I want to do the production, and Mark and Nick were like, but we don't know if you know how to do that yet. And I was like, I do, like Dio told me. And they're like, yeah, we don't know yet. And I was like, okay. And then Durand actually had to leave, and I was like, please put me in, coach, like let me do it. So they eventually ended up letting me edit something. And at the time, I like started editing in New York City, and then after I was done with school, I moved to Boston, and I moved into a house with Lauren, Alex Kasukis, and Alex Green, and we kind of all were starting up at the same time and sharing trade secrets back and forth. We were all young and like just kind of learning at ourselves, but we're like, oh, like I learned how to do this drum sequence, like you can do this and you can do that, and so we kind of all started learning about how to actually do a cappella production at the same time, and it was pretty cool.
So since you kind of got in with TVC like on the ground floor, you've kind of like been able to in some degree like shape what it is that the company is trying to do. Like what were your kind of like philosophies regarding production and everything and recording groups that you kind of wanted to be implementing and that you were so passionate about from the onset?
Yeah, I really wanted to, so my main thing when I was directing acapellas was I really wanted to tap into the like emotional arc of singing and like what it can do for you because I think this is the psychologist part of me where I realized that music was always what helped me get through any moments of hardship in my life, and I wanted to be able to help people use that as an artistic expression. And because, a cappella was kind of at the time a little bit more like kitschy and fun. And not that there wasn't serious things going on, because there were. But I wanted it to be like, I really wanted people to make connections with the human voice and be able to really like dig deep into what they were feeling and what they were going through. And that may have just been like internal. It was probably a little less of like what TVC's like actual mission statement was, I guess, at the time. They were just trying to reach people and educate, basically. Those are some of our like, morals that we want to educate as best as we can and get like the next generations of people going. So that was important to me. So I really just wanted to help people express themselves, I guess is the best way to say it, through this art form.
Yeah, absolutely. And this might be a direct question, but I'm just super curious. But just since there's not so many female producers in the acapella scene and like music scene in general, I'm just curious what your experience has been from that angle, and if there's been like any challenges for you trying to establish yourself. especially starting up?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's kind of like getting yourself out there, and making people aware that you have a gift to share, and that you want to collaborate with them. That is hard. It's hard for anyone. At the time, it was a little. I was kind of the first female engineer in acapella, so it was a little bit hard as a female to kind of join the boys club, basically. But I had, like I said, I had so many friends who let me in there willingly, and I'm so thankful for all of them. Both Alex's included, Dave, Dio, James Cannon, a bunch of people. So they were super excited to have me around, and I was thankful for them for allowing me to kind of just like do what I needed to do and do what I wanted. So there was a big support system there, actually, to help be like, hey, like, I'm Angela, and like I want to show you like what we can do together. So I think that's the hardest thing, is like saying, like, getting yourself known, and especially when there were a lot of people coming up at the same time. It was kind of just like, well, what do you bring to the table versus somebody else? And I luckily came from a really talented group at the time, and Acapellas. We started recording with them, and their album did decently well. Seamless was the name of it, and I met Shams, and we started recording the first Nor'easters album. That was probably the third project that I had recorded in my bedroom closet. And so it kind of was like the stars kind of aligned, and those groups were kind of doing well at the time when I was coming up in the world of acapella, and we kind of collaborated and made ourselves known as groups and as individuals. So
yeah, totally. So I don't know exactly the timeline, but like somewhere in here, Musae became a thing. Like,
yes.
How did that figure into the equation?
Musae started through an email chain in 2010. It actually, a couple of people went to SoJam that year and realized that there wasn't a professional female a cappella group in the States really touring a lot and doing anything huge. So we were like, well, why don't we start some? And we kind of started this like crazy thing where everybody was from a different part of the country, and we're asking everyone like, who's the best bass singer And Ed Boyer's like, oh, Johanna Vincent from DVC, like 100%. We're like, cool. And like we like messaged her on Facebook. She was like, yeah, I'll join your group. Like we had no idea what we were doing. And we like went to a Pitch Slap show and found Hannah Giuliano, and we found Courtney, now Chapel, but then Godwin, through a friend in Atlanta, because she sang with the UGA group called Noteworthy. And we all just kind of like got together on a whim and had a retreat in Boston, in Somerville, and got our first arrangement going and started making videos, and then eventually auditioned for the Sing Off, and that, we didn't end up on the show, but we continued going from there. And that's basically how that started. Just a bunch of girls like wanting to get together and singing.
Yeah. What was the initial goal of like the group, and how did that kind of evolve over time?
Yeah. I think, well, that's kind of hard. I mean, I guess the initial goal,
at least for you.
yeah, for me, I just kind of wanted to, well, for me, it was hard because I wasn't doing a lot of singing at the time. So it was like a little bit personal where I just wanted to continue singing. And I wanted to show other girls that they could get out there and join a professional group or start their own. And that was a huge goal of mine and some of the other girls as well. I guess like small goals, like we wanted to see if we could headline a festival or, things like that. And we ended up doing the gig at SoJam that Dio got for us in 2011. And then, from there, sharing all of our individual talents with people. We wanted to like do workshops and educate and things like that. So I guess there were a lot of goals there from everybody else in the group having a little bit of different goals. But, we kind of came together and decided we just wanted to start like lightly touring and see what that would do and educating.
Well, the reception to the group was like, it seemed like it was like people were very into it like very early on, because SoJam happens, like you mentioned, like very quickly, and there's my favorite Musae video will always be Amnesia, I think, because it's just like that crazy thing, and then Hong Kong and everything, and like so like was there ever a point where you were like, oh, like, should we make more time for this than we are making? Or was it always going to be a thing where, like, this time during the year we'll do a retreat and do XYZ type thing?
I think that has shifted based on our members at the time or based on where they were in their lives at the time. I think when we first started, we were like, yeah, we're going to go and be famous. We're going to try out for America's Got Talent. And we did, and went to Vegas or got the Vegas ticket or whatever. I don't know what it was. But we ended up bowing out of the contract because everybody was trying to do their own thing as well in music. So I think that's always been a little bit of a struggle, and I think that actually I've seen that happen with a lot of groups where they don't know exactly how far they want to push it.
Right.
And yeah, there was definitely a time where we wanted to go more full time. But right now, and for the past few years, we've mostly done tour stints. We went 5 weeks over to Asia and did the Hong Kong tour, as you mentioned, and went to Taiwan. Or this January, we went to Europe for 3 weeks. And, here and there, we'll go to festivals, or we'll have gigs, and we'll kind of block other gigs around it. But we found that actually works the best because all of the girls do, they all have their own full-time jobs. They did then, and, not when we first started, because I guess we were both, we were all kind of coming right out of school. Right. But now definitely we all have our own lives, I guess, and things to do. So we found that doing them in smaller tours works better than constantly touring for 6 months straight.
Yeah. And I think just in the nature of how the group started, being that everyone was from all different places, it must have been, I would imagine in the beginning, a little tricky to figure out how the group would work and function. But I'm also curious because obviously you're talking about tours and performances that you kind of do throughout the year, and those I'd imagine kind of come up whenever someone emails you or you see something and there's some sort of correspondence. But how do you decide and figure out when you want to make new content or new videos and that sort of
some of it, you mentioned, we attach to performances. So if somebody emails us and say hey, we have this school that wants to bring you in Chicago, and then we'll kind of come in a couple days beforehand and learn some music, things like that. But also, we just kind of decide what our goals are for that time span. For the fall, we want to record a single and then, learn 4 new arrangements for our show. So we, for example, we just decided that we were recording, and we recorded all remotely. But ideally, we would like to do that together if we could. So we're actually in the process right now of trying to put together a retreat. So we kind of send a doodle out and see what weekends people happen to be available, and figure out what sort of content we want to create during those time frames.
Yeah.
Yeah. Relate hard to that at the moment as as I'm trying to do a similar thing. Yeah, so I mean, it feels like you guys have kind of figured out how it is that you function, and the best way to go about doing logistical stuff for you, and satisfying that need to be creative while making sense with the lives that you're living. What for a newer group of any sort, starting out, or even older groups who want to get to a Musae level, what would you say to a group like that?
Well, first of all, it helps if you live in the same place. But if you don't live in the same place, we have weekly meetings. That's helpful. We do Google Hangout, and we talk about what our goals are for that week, or for, the upcoming weeks if we have a gig or something like that. So we all try to stay on the same page with that, and it's kind of like a rehearsal time, even though we can't technically rehearse. But during that time, we'll discuss, did you hear the new Janelle Monáe song, Make Me Feel? Let's do it. And then we'll decide who arranges it, just like we would be in a rehearsal. And then one of the girls arranges it, and, Mel will send out part tapes, and we'll kind of learn all of our stuff on our own, and then get together a couple of days before the gig, put it together, and then get on stage. So
are you doing Make Me Feel out of curiosity?
We are, actually.
Nice.
We totally are. We just performed it for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
Fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. So that I would suggest, keeping in constant communication, make sure that you have weekly meetings where you discuss your goals so that you guys stay on the same page. Anytime that we found that we don't have those meetings, we all kind of go off into our own lives and forget about the band for a little bit. So that constant communication is important.
Yeah.
If you don't have a lot of time to rehearse because you guys all have your own lives, do part tapes. I know we're all really like good musicians and don't need part tapes, but they help when you don't have the time together because you're actually listening to somebody singing it, instead of just like reading it along with a MIDI or, just like sight singing it. That gets us performance ready way before we normally would with the amount of time that we actually have together before a gig.
Well, you'd mentioned like constant communication, and I think just to kind of tie it back to TVC and production and everything, I feel like often in music holistically, but in acapella for sure, where there's like a lot of scholastic groups going on, and that's a lot of the groups that are recording, there's sometimes a divide between producer and the group and their performer of trying to communicate what is wanted, and like, the producer is trying to push the singer to do XYZ that they're not comfortable with, or like in terms of a production technique, or the singer wants it to sound like XYZ type thing. Like, what's been like your biggest kind of lessons in working with a ton of groups that ultimately won Caras and all these things?
Yeah. Well, one thing is that every person in every group is extremely different. And I think, like you said, the psychology helps somehow. And this is where I think it is, like in the studio, you have to immediately be able to read someone and figure out like how they need to be coached. And that's on a singer level. From a music director level, you need to establish that trust with the director. And you have to keep that open line of communication. So they can say like, oh, we're trying to make this like funk, hip hop, dubstep version of Chandelier. Like, can you do that? And you're like, cool, yeah, like let's talk through that. I'm not sure where you're going with that. I mean, that's obviously an extreme example, and I don't think that's actually ever happened. But yeah, so we like to have like pre-mixing calls, pre-project calls to get a vision from each of the groups, and that's from the overall level. But then from the individual singer, every single one of them wants to bring something different to the table and can bring something different to the table. So you kind of have to read the situation, see how they're going to respond best, and, work the room basically and figure that out quickly.
What's the biggest thing that like you would say that you feel like people wouldn't know from your perspective of like what's going on while you're producing something?
Ooh, we're trying our hardest as producers to get the best version of each person that walks into the studio. And I think that because a lot of the people don't know us personally when they come in, they don't know that we have their best interests at heart. And they might be a little bit afraid that we're not going to portray them in the way that they want to be portrayed. And I can say as a producer myself and talking to many others that we're all trying our best to show them off in the best light. And I think sometimes that doesn't always come across, whether it just be like a communication breakdown or something. But I would always want someone to know that I'm trying my best, that when I tell them to do something over again, or I'm very specific about something, it's because I'm trying to get them to do something to make the entire experience better. So I'm not sure if people know that or not. I would hope so, but I think there are some people who might think that there are different reasons behind it, and I'm not exactly sure what those would be, but I just get that vibe from some people sometimes.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I'd imagine also when you're someone coming in to record, you're just so hyper focused on what you're doing and what your performance is that some of the other factors might not be like apparent right in your face. So that might be a reason why too.
Yeah, they tend to focus on like being correct and being accurate.
Yeah.
And as a producer, I'm looking at the overall picture. Like, do you sound engaged?
Right.
Do you sound excited? Or are you bringing across the emotion of the song? Does that overall line fit? Or, and that's the big picture. But at the same time, I'm also thinking, okay, well, they did this solo take of this verse 4 times, and every time they said this word, funny, and I don't know how to say that exactly to them without like trying to just get them to do that one word in the way that like brings across whatever feeling I'm thinking.
Right.
And they're like, oh my God, why is she making me do this 8 times, you know? But I'm looking for something specific in that moment to get the big picture going.
Right.
And they don't always know, because they're thinking, oh, like, you know, they're in their own zone. They're thinking about their own personal thing to deliver their solo or their background part in the best way they can. So yeah, I think there's just like there's a little bit of separation there between producer and singer. So, but totally understandable, because we're trying to do different things, you know?
Yeah, well, speaking of, I'm sure there's lots of situations where that's the case, but then I feel like you also have, you know, a lot of groups that record and like want to go back to you because you've done so much great work, whether that's like with Nor'easters or whatever else it is that you've that has won so many awards. Like a lot of people have like come back to you and you're like, I was at a next level session that you were teaching a few years back, and like it's clear like like watching you work that like you are able to establish that connection. There's like a reason that people want to come back to like work with you again. Have there been any projects that you've worked on in your career with TVC that have kind of stood out as kind of like defining like what it is that you like wanted to go about accomplishing, and that you feel that you did that thing?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, I mean, that situation I spoke about before is just like kind of your general, like, you don't really know the group really well, but with groups that you have established that rapport with, that come back, they trust you and you trust them. And a couple of the projects that have really felt like that were with the Nor'easter second album that we did, Equilibrium, which was a huge turning point in acapella at the time. They were trying to say something really large, and so were we. And I think that was probably one of the better collaborations between the group and myself and Dave. Totally. Another group that we have an amazing relationship with is Faux. Their album Lithium was probably one of the most fun we've ever had in the studio, mostly because they've got some amazing characters in that group and have throughout time. But they also have incredible talents.
For sure.
So that, and they were trying to say something very specific with that album as well. And then another one was Evolve by Reverb from Florida State. And that one was really special to me because one of my friends from college started Reverb, and then like, you know, I watched them grow, and then they came to this point where Skip Stratman and Alex Mendez and David Mant were like, we want to make this incredible thing, and we were all on the same page. So yeah, those kinds of experiences where you find the right group of people at the right time, they are the best experiences as a producer, because it almost feels like you're a part of those groups during those album processes. So they want your opinion. They, you know, you'll give them a mix, and instead of being like, you know, they're critical, but instead of like, you know, like picking out, oh, like I want to hear Barry number 4 a little louder here. They're like, oh, I want this section to feel more cinematic. Like, how do you think we can get this to be more cinematic? And they're thinking about like the overall art instead of like more specific. So, those are probably 3 of my favorite projects through the time. I've had others that are also amazing, but those kind of I can think of specifically.
Yeah, we'll link all of those in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
I guess just taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture of all of this, you've obviously undergone a huge change in the past year, transitioning from producer to CEO. So I'm just curious personally how that's been for you, kind of making the shift. And obviously your workload and your the things that you're in charge of have obviously expanded. So I'm curious how that's been for you.
Yeah, it's been exciting. Obviously, with Dave going back to school, he's still involved with TVC in the way that he's doing a little bit of live production, and he's still the owner, so he's involved that way. But yeah, handing me the CEO position was a large task. I mean, at the time, we're a pretty large company for a small niche. We have a lot of employees, a lot of people, a lot of contractors, a lot of people to make sure that, they can eat, and they can, keep doing their art. And that is hard. Managing people is difficult, even though my team is great. Everyone works well, but, it's just like with any job, you have to figure out, one day, like this person and this person didn't totally get along, and you have to be the mediator as like a manager. But then at the same time, you're also talking to groups and trying to, send invoices out and doing all those things. And then you're like, shoot, but I need to do my own mix today. Like, what am I going to do? So, but I also need to go to Wells Fargo, and there isn't a Wells Fargo within 50 miles, and I got to get to the bank to get a blank check for whatever reason. You're like, wow. So my life has changed in the way that before I was completely focused on the music. I obviously was like a senior member of the production team, so I did a lot of mentoring to the other employees, but I wasn't like the actual person in charge. So that has changed a lot. I have to answer a lot of help me, my Pro Tools won't work calls, or like, while I'm in the middle of doing something else, So yeah, it changes my day to day, and it changes the amount of time that I actually get to work on music versus doing, CEO stuff. But I've tried really hard to keep it at least like half and half, because I still really love. That's why I got into this, is because I am such a music nerd, and I love doing it, and I love the human connection that this art form brings. So I like to keep that as best as possible, as a part of my daily life. So that's basically how it's changed. You just take on different responsibilities, but yeah.
Yeah. So now, as the CEO, like what is the tagline for TVC in 2018, and like what do you want the world to see and get out of your company?
Yeah, I mean, I think our tagline for a while has been find your next level, and we've really focused in on some of the educational aspects over the last like 2-ish years. We've expanded our program into having more events, different types of events. We had like Spectrum singing events this year with Aaron Hackle, and not just like next level produce, which is what we did for the first few years. So now we have arranging, and we want to do more songwriting things, and just like kind of reaching people through education is, I think, our continued goal. As a company. We are looking into doing these sorts of things online, and we're at the beginning stages of that, but we would like to kind of, if you've seen like Masterclass on Facebook where, they teach you about things that way, we're kind of looking into a system like that to expand the education that way, because that's where you find the new geniuses in this art form. Is they're the ones who are super excited. They're the ones who come to these educational events. They're the freshmen in their group who's like super excited about arranging, and like they're not even in charge, but they're like so motivated. And then in 4 years, they're the ones who like annihilate everyone at ICCA and like come up with the most amazing arrangement that wins every Cara. So we like finding those people and like investing in them at a young point in their career. So yeah, I would say that that's our major goal as a company, and I think that will always be probably our center. Obviously it's not our main point of business, and our main point of business is production, but it kind of incorporates, because we do the education, then we find people who are interested in doing different things for acapella, like right now, for example, we have 3 interns all wanting to do different things in acapella, and we place them with different people who have different strengths, to kind of like cultivate them and see like what they do next. That's one of my favorite things. Hannah Tobias was a next level student, and now she's like working on Broadway, she's crazy talented. So that's our goal, to find, the Hannah Tobiases of the world.
Totally. Well, I think that leads really nicely into the last few questions that we like to ask, because we're right at the end of the interview today. The first one being, what trends in acapella right now are you excited by and want to see more of?
Well, this is more of a live thing, but I really am interested in people starting to include more technology on stage. As like a producer nerd, that is really exciting for me. We're starting to add a lot more of that with Musae, because Mel basically live DJs like while we're on stage. But yeah, I mean, I've seen it a lot more in professional groups that are just starting. So that's a trend that I want to I want to see what the next thing people can do with technology on stage, because we've kind of seen a lot of what people can vocally do with just themselves. I feel like we're at a little bit of a standstill that way. I'm waiting for the next innovation from a purely vocal standpoint. But I think as people start, seeing more Aurora performances, they're going to be like, oh, that's so cool. They use all these cool pedals and they do all these cool tricks and they write their own music. And, I want to see it go in that direction. Don't get me wrong. I still love when people stand and sing and, around one microphone and it's like the most beautiful ballad you've ever heard and like everyone in the audience is crying. I still love that. But, like I said, as the production nerd, I'm like, oh, like I want to see what the next thing people can do on stage is.
Yeah. And then the second question is just what's on the plate for you? So what's upcoming?
Well, I just came back from Alaska, so that's kind of cool with Muse.
Yeah, I saw that you
never been to Alaska, so that was most recent. But yeah, I'm going to Florida for a little while, my favorite place on earth, where I'm from. Also going to Disney World. But yeah, I'm recording a bunch of groups. So at NAC last year, one of the prizes was a single. So I'm going around and recording a bunch of those groups because apparently there's something in the water in Florida, and everybody down there is awesome at singing. So
But truly, though,
no,
so
seriously, there are so many groups down there that are like really motivated. Not only are they incredibly talented, but they're super motivated. So I'm going down there to do some recording. And then the next thing for me personally, Musae is trying to have a new retreat. We're trying to release a new single, so be on the lookout for that. We're almost done with the production side of it. So yeah, that's kind of what's next for me the next couple months. So
awesome. Well, Angela, thank you so much for joining us this week. It was really nice to talk to you. We will be for sure linking all the things that we mentioned in the show notes, but I'm sure that we'll be talking to you again. But for now, hope that we see you next week on a new episode of Thank you so much for listening to our conversation with Angela. The track you're hearing is Musae's version of Amnesia that we mentioned in the episode. I think the thing that struck me most from talking to her is that she's super humble about all these things that she's accomplished, but like she fully created opportunities for herself when there were no obvious doors open.
Oh, absolutely. And how she was hoping for an internship right out of college, and then she saw that there wasn't one waiting, so she was like, screw it, I'm just going to go to audio school. That was super inspiring, especially when you track her career all the way to where it is now.
Yeah, and she's not even like a top female producer per se, though she's obviously shattered a lot of ceilings and kind of created a space for female engineers, but like she's just a top acapella producer period.
Yes, absolutely. And everything she was saying about Musae obviously resonated with us because from a Birdland angle, definitely dealt with the long distance thing in the past, but they're living proof that you can find a way.
Yeah, and speaking of Musae, we haven't teased the next episode in our outros for a while, but if you've made it this far, Sam Creighton is going to be our guest next week.
We're super excited about that. And if you want to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to Head Voice wherever you listen to your podcast. If you have a second, please leave us a review or follow our socials. It genuinely helps us to get more people listening. So please. Please.
Like yesterday, we asked what you're all listening to on Instagram, got a bunch of responses, which was super cool, and we'll continue to do fun stuff like that. So don't miss out.
Tune in next week for a new episode with Sam Creighton. It's going to come out before midnight.